Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. We expect haunted houses to creak. We expect graveyards to feel cold. But what about the places that don't warn us? Our workplace, a safe place. Can a place remember more clearly than we do what once happened inside its walls? Can an object hold on to the energy of the past? And what if we're not imagining these feelings, that weight, that presence that seems to grow the longer we try to ignore it? Some things don't need to slam doors or whisper your name to leave their mark. They can sit quietly, watch, sometimes follow. Tonight, we explore strangely unsettling places and objects that often leave us with more questions. We learn that it's not just ghosts that find their way into our lives. Sometimes it's something we bring in ourselves. So, let's get started, shall we? This happened about 4 years ago while I was staying in a hotel just outside of Tulsa. Nothing fancy, just one of those mid-range chains off the highway. Waffles in the morning, has free coffee 24/7 in the lobby. I was on a short work trip, just an overnight stay. I got in late, checked in. I headed straight to my room on the 3rd floor. I remember thinking it was quiet, like too quiet. No TVs through the walls, no thumps from above or below, and no one else in the hallway. That's rare for a hotel like this, but I figured I just got lucky. Around 2 a.m., I woke up feeling weird. Not sick or anything, just like I wasn't alone. It wasn't something loud or anything banging or lights flickering, just a sensation. I sat up in bed and instinctively looked toward the armchair by the window. There was a woman sitting there, not moving, just sitting with her hands on her lap, looking straight ahead, but not at me, towards the TV, which wasn't even on. She was older, gray hair, long sweater, pale face. For half a second, I thought maybe I'd had a stroke or fallen asleep in the lobby or something. Then I blinked and she was gone. I don't mean she faded away or stood up. I mean she wasn't there. The chair was empty. I didn't scream. I didn't get up. I just sat there with my hands gripping the blanket like a little kid. Eventually, I turned on every light in the room, checked the closet, the bathroom, under the bed. Nothing. But I didn't sleep again that night. Just kept the TV on, waited for the sun. The kicker, when I mentioned it to the front desk on checkout, trying to laugh it off like, hey, y'all got any ghosts on the 3rd floor? The clerk just smiled too quickly and said, you're not the first to ask. I didn't push it. I just took my receipt and left, but I haven't stayed in that hotel chain since. When I was 9, my family moved into this older house with a swimming pool, which was a huge deal to me at the time. The house had sat vacant for years, a foreclosure situation, I thought, and the pool had gone completely to hell, full of algae, cracked tiles, busted pump. But my parents had some money saved and spent weeks fixing it up before we officially moved in. I remember my dad joking that the pool was the reason they bought the house in the first place. I helped during the renovation by mostly getting in the way, poking the gunk with sticks. But once it was filled and blue and sparkling again, it did feel like magic. The backyard smelled like chlorine and sunscreen for most of that first summer. It was perfect until it wasn't. I remember the first weird thing happening maybe a month after we moved in. I was swimming alone one afternoon. I wasn't supposed to be, but I always begged and pestered, and eventually my mom would cave so long as I promised to stay in the shallow end. That day I was just floating around on my back when I felt something grab my ankle and yank. It wasn't like kicking off the wall or brushing against a leaf. It was a pull, hard enough that my head went under and I swallowed water. I came up coughing and flailing, completely freaked out. My mom came running when she heard me yell, but of course, no one was there. She asked if I'd slipped, and I said no, something had grabbed me. Her face did this weird thing where it stayed calm, but her eyes didn't. She made me get out immediately, and we didn't talk about it again. After that, I didn't want to swim alone. And then more stuff started happening. At night, we would hear splashes. Not like frogs jumping in, but big splashes, like someone cannonballing into the deep end. The first few times, my dad stormed outside, thinking it was teenagers that had broken in, or that an animal had fallen in, but he never found anything. And the water was still. Sometimes the gate would be latched, sometimes it wouldn't be. Sometimes the pool light would flicker even though it had just been replaced. We'd hear water sloshing and crying, muffled, like someone was underwater. One time my bedroom window fogged up from the outside in the middle of the night. It had a small handprint on it. It became this quiet thing in the house. We didn't talk about it, not really. If I said something, my mom would tell me I had a bad dream or was stirring things up again. But even they were on edge. I caught my dad draining and refilling the pool once with no explanation. Just said the filter was acting up. We moved when I was in high school. Nothing dramatic, just a new job for my dad in a different city. It wasn't until I came home from college one Thanksgiving that my mom let something slip. She'd had too much wine, and we were sitting around after dinner when I mentioned how creepy the pool had been. She kind of froze and then said, "You know, I never told you this, but the people who lived there before us, they had a little boy. He drowned in that pool. We learned it later, but we couldn't tell you." I just stared at her. "They left after that," she continued. "Never came back for their stuff or anything. Your dad found out when he was talking to the old mailman. Said the kid got stuck under one of the broken pool covers. While his mom was just inside making lunch. He was only 7. I was 9 when we moved in. Anyway, I still have a really hard time with swimming pools." I've never been the type to believe in ghosts. Not in a cynical, prove-it-to-me kind of way. I just never really thought about it much. I work in HR, I drink too much coffee, I spend most of my day answering emails and wondering how my inbox is somehow always full. This event happened maybe 2 years ago. I had just started a new job working in a converted historic building downtown. It was neat with its high ceilings, exposed brick, lots of character. It used to be a post office in the early 1900s, and before that, apparently a courthouse or jail, depending on which hallway plaque you believe. I stayed late my second week on the job to finish some onboarding paperwork. Everyone else had cleared out by 5, but I wanted to get ahead. Around 6:30, I was the only one left, sitting at my desk on the 3rd floor. The only light on in the entire wing. It was quiet except for the hum of the exit sign and the occasional creak of the old building itself. But I heard footsteps, not above or below, but on my floor, coming down the hallway, slow and deliberate. I figured it was maintenance or security, but then I remembered the security guy came through right before 5. And there's no cleaning staff until after 9. I poked my head out and said, "Hey, sorry, didn't realize anyone was still here." No answer, just the footsteps continuing. So I followed them down the hallway. Empty office after empty office. No one there. The footsteps just stopped, mid-hallway. I stood there for a second, wondering if maybe the building's acoustics were playing tricks on me, when I felt something. Just a shift in the air, like someone was behind me. I turned around and caught a glimpse, just a flash, of someone stepping into one of the old mail sorting rooms. The door swung gently shut behind them, even though I hadn't heard it open. I went in, heart racing. The room was empty. I even checked behind the filing cabinets. Not a thing. When I told my coworker about it the next day, they just said, "Oh yeah, that wing's weird. The mailroom used to be part of the old jailhouse. They say one of the inmates died in there. Locked in overnight. Forgotten." I figured that was just office gossip, they said. Sure. I laughed it off, of course. Said it was probably just nerves, but I don't want to work late anymore. Not unless someone else is there. I collect Funko pop dolls. It's a bit of an obsession. I have an entire room dedicated to displaying them. If I watch a show, I have Funkos for it. Most recently, I was trying to complete my Golden Girls collection, but I couldn't find a Betty White, so I turned to eBay. Now, Rose Funkos don't hold any special value. Most are under $10, but one listing stood out from the pack. It read, "This thing is evil. Pay the shipping and it's yours. No returns." Well, who could pass up a deal like that? I was thinking that it probably had some sort of defect, but I was willing to pay a few bucks just for the story. I tried asking the seller for specifics, but the only response they gave me was that the thing ruined my life and good luck. This only intrigued me more. There's no shortage of haunted items or cursed dolls on eBay, but they usually come with detailed claims of actual paranormal activity. Yet this person was either too lazy to come up with a good story or too traumatized to talk about it. And either way, I was going to get the doll. A few weeks later, Rose arrived and she looked perfect. The box was in mint condition. I was shocked, my curiosity only increasing. What was the seller's angle? They had a great rating, no complaints, no other haunted items. I couldn't figure it out, but their loss seemed like my gain. I put Rose on the shelf with the rest of my Golden Girls, and I went on with my day. When I woke up the next morning, I went into my office to discover that 3 shelves worth of Funkos had fallen onto the floor. It's safe to say that that had never happened before. I don't have any pets. There's no earthquakes where I live, so what the hell? The next day, same thing. I go into my office and there's a pile of boxes on the floor. This time I was angry. 2 rare ones landed under heavier ones and took on some damage. I like to think that I'm a fairly logical person, but I'm also extremely paranoid. So my first thought was, dear God, did they put something inside that box? Like a remote control camera or tiny robot. I don't know, but it had to be something. I opened Rose and checked every inch of her, but it was just a normal Funko and box. There was nothing extra inside. Nothing seemed to be tampered with. When I was done, the box couldn't really be called mint anymore, so I just threw it away and put Rose on my nightstand. Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, but you weren't sure why? You know that thing where you think you heard a noise, but now you hear nothing, so maybe you dreamed it. It happened to me twice that night. The second time, I got up to go to the bathroom and I stepped on something painful. It was Rose. She'd fallen onto the floor, again. More annoyed than anything, I put it back on the nightstand, did my business, and returned to bed. The next morning, I rolled onto my back and felt another sharp pain. Rose was in the goddamn bed. I hadn't even placed her on the side next to the bed. If anything, it should have fallen on the floor again. Sweet, innocent Betty White was starting to seem like a secret sadist. Crossing over from angry to freaked out, I threw it in a drawer and planned to forget that it existed. That night, I went to get into bed, but it was occupied. Rose was on my pillow, like someone had placed her there. If I didn't live alone, this would have been the simple explanation. But no one has been in my house. I'm practically a hermit. No one else is ever here. So again, I ask, what the actual hell? That was my last straw. I took the Funko back to my office and locked it in a filing cabinet. That's where it is now. I haven't had any other incidents, but I only go there during the day. I haven't exactly been checking on it. I don't really know what to make of all of this. Like, how the hell does something end up haunting a Funko doll? That's absurd even for paranormal standards, I would think. And not just any Funko doll. Betty White. I guess the only thing I really need to know now is, does anyone want a used Rose Funko doll? It's yours for the price of shipping. I moved into a rental duplex in a small town outside of Asheville, North Carolina, right before spring. It's a nice little sleepy place where people still wave at each other on the sidewalks, and the only restaurant is a diner that closes at 6. I was in a bit of a transition, basically where I was saying new start a lot until it started to feel like one. The unit was clean, the rent was cheap, and the place came with a little patch of gravel driveway that curved around a clump of dogwoods. I didn't know it yet, but that driveway would be the reason I started locking my bedroom window. It started subtle. I'd come home in the morning and see little piles of pebbles in neat triangles on the hood of my car, or one of my side mirrors completely turned inward. The first few times I brushed it off, probably neighborhood kids, could even be a raccoon. But then one morning in early March, I woke up just after 3 a.m. to a sound I couldn't explain. I sleep light, always have. It wasn't a bang or a thud, more like gravel shifting. I crept over to the blinds and peeked out. There, in the soft pill of the porch light, was a girl. She couldn't have been older than 10 or 11, hair pulled back into a low braid, white nightgown stained at the hem. She was barefoot, standing right in the gravel drive, staring at my car. At first I thought that she must be sleepwalking, maybe from the unit next door. But when I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, she didn't look at me. She didn't move at all. Just as I was about to say something, she just slowly lifted her hand and pointed at the front of my car. I froze, not because of what she did, but because of how she looked doing it. Her arm bent at the wrong angle, her finger crooked like it had been broken and never healed right. And though the porch light should have illuminated her face, it didn't. Her features stayed hidden in the shadows, like the light couldn't quite reach her. I said, "Are you okay?" But the moment the words left my mouth, she dropped her arm, turned around, and walked off, right through the row of dogwoods lining the drive. The next morning, I saw tire marks, long and black, carved through the gravel. My neighbor's car had clearly tried to brake, but not fast enough. He told me later that morning, visibly shaken, he'd swerved to avoid hitting a girl in a white nightgown, standing in the driveway. She came out of nowhere, he said. I don't even know where she could have come from. It was like she was just there. He missed her, but in doing so, slammed into the wooden fence next to the duplex. His airbags deployed, and he was fine, just bruised and terrified. A few days later, I brought it up to the woman who manages the rentals. I kept it casual at first, but when I mentioned what we'd seen, she went quiet. There was an accident in that drive, she finally said. Almost 20 years ago now. Little girl snuck out to ride her bike at night. Driver didn't see her. It was tragic. The girl's name was Lacey. She died right where my car had been parked. I didn't see her again after that night. No more pebbles, no more gravel shifting in the dark. I don't know if she was warning me or my neighbor, or just reliving something that never let her rest. But I know what I saw, and I also know I'm not the only one. There was a show that aired in the early 90s that me and my brother got super into called James Randi, Psychic Detective. It was a program filmed in front of a live audience, and the host, James Randi, would have guests on, all who claimed to possess psychic or unworldly abilities. Then, under controlled experiments, if they can prove their abilities to be true, they'd win a cash prize of $100,000. And wouldn't you be surprised to know that none of the contestants ever won the money over the whole duration of the show being on the air? James Randi was always polite, a very matter-of-fact person when he'd gesture the failed psychic off the stage, and every time, the looks on their faces were so sad, like they really thought they were going to do whatever they were going to do. How do you get such grandiose levels of delusion? To put yourself through that humiliation on TV, in front of a live audience, they volunteered their time to go do that too. It's not like James Randi traveled to their place of business with a camera crew and put them on blast. These people did it to themselves. They probably pulled a couple fast ones in their small towns, thought that they were good enough for the big time. Phony, fake, magician valor. Keeping all this in mind, names have been changed because my brother actually did make a little name for himself in the journalism field, and he works for a news station. Sometimes he takes me along or lets me get backstage with him when they're doing fun events, and I wouldn't want to ruin that. Most I can say is, if you live in the South, let's say Southeast, and watch the morning news, a morning news anchor that you see dressed in a nice suit, looking all professional while he delivers the headlines, that's actually my big brother in disguise. And this story is about when he was in his first year of college. In the suburban area we lived, right before the houses start turning into businesses, there was a psychic that ran her business out of her house. This place had always been there ever since I could remember. No matter what time, day or night, the neon sign in the window has never been turned off. It looked expensive. The sign took up most of the front window. It was a humongous hand with an eye in the center. Psychic was written above the eye, making it look like it had eyelashes. The owner was a woman. I'd say she was in her late 40s. She looked about our mom's age at the time. Her hair was dyed black, Alice Cooper-looking makeup, the whole 9 yards. But that's all I ever saw of her, until my brother Pete came home on vacation, first semester of college. He was determined to write an investigative hit piece on our local town psychic, expose her for the fraud that she was, blah, blah, blah. He came home like his whole GPA would plummet if he didn't bring this lady down over his 2-week break that he had back in town. He did some of his freshman psychology and convinced me to join him on his mission. I was 15. It was either that or stay home with our parents. I said, yeah, sign me up. He brought home a bunch of spy gadgets like tiny mics and cameras, showed me how to use the recording equipment. His first plan was to call the place himself, ask for an appointment with a made-up story, but we couldn't even find a listing in the phone book. He would have to walk in and do it in person. For his first interaction, Pete was mic'd up while I sat in the back seat of his car, with my lap filled with a clunky transmitter linked up to a tape recorder-looking thing. I don't know how all of it hooked up, but my job was to listen in with these big headphones and move the wire transmitter around if he got staticky. We parked across the street and Pete got out to go in, but when he tried the door, it was locked. Under the neon sign in the window next to the door, there was a much smaller sign with a phone number that he wrote down. But since we'd already made the trip, he knocked. Nobody came to the door. Persistent, Pete kept with rap-tap-tapping on the glass. A disadvantage about working from home is that people have a good idea at knowing when you're there, because all of your cars are in the driveway. That's what made Pete continue knocking. Then, she just appeared at the door. She didn't open it, but she was standing on the other side of the glass, glaring at Pete. I hear him go, "Whoa," and her ask what. He says, "I need a psychic reading," and she says no, then disappeared from the door. Pete starts knocking again and trying to explain his made-up story and why he desperately needs her services, saying that he'll pay her $100. She returns to the glass and tells him that she doesn't take on clients and to go away. Pete says, "But I need your help." She says, "No, you don't," then disappears from the door again. Pete slowly walks back to the car. There's a defeat in his voice that the recording captures when he gets in, along with him cussing at me because I hadn't yet turned off the recorder. Next day, he calls the number that he wrote down, and in a surprising change of predictions that we had, she answered almost on the first ring. It caught Pete off guard, and his first lines are a stammering bumble, something about his 15-year-old sister's been kidnapped, case has gone cold, needs her help. Somehow, she recognized his voice, confirms that they'd met the day before. He says yes, and then there's a long pause on the phone. Then, she says 3 o'clock and hangs up. Pete says thank you to a dial tone before hanging up his line. He tells me she took the bait. Then we went to the garage and began setting up the equipment in his car, fitting him up with his spy gear. This time he was going to use a small camera, concealed under a baseball cap. Up until we left for his appointment, Pete spent the whole time making sure everything was perfect and rehearsing his story, telling me to throw him a curveball question so he can practice improvising answers. He was ready. He was going to go in there with some random stuff he collected around the house, claim that they were mine, and then ask if she could get a sense as to what happened in my cold case. We got there punctually at 2:50, but the door remained locked until 3. On the dot of 3, the mic picked up a loud squeak when the bolt locks turned on the inside of the door, and then it opened on its own. The moment Pete steps through the threshold of the building, all of his electrical equipment went haywire. I tried moving the transmitter in all different ways, but the static wouldn't let up. Then everything in the car just shut down. He went in there, unaware that his gear had malfunctioned, and closed the door behind him. Now this part is purely from my brother's point of view because none of the equipment would come back on. But there was no reason for him to have lied about what happened and intentionally tank his potential grade for this investigative story. When he returned back to the car, I didn't know how much time had passed. I didn't have a watch on, but he couldn't have been in there for more than 10 minutes. At first, he didn't say anything when he got in the car. I was on the edge of my seat asking what happened. What did it look like in there? Did she buy the story? But then it was the first time I'd seen my big brother cry. He put his head on his steering wheel before focusing a response between his clenched teeth. All he said was, "She's real." Then he stepped on the gas and we drove back home. The car ride was quiet. I could see Pete was still trying to process everything. Eventually he settled down, and I was able to get the whole story about what had happened. When he walked in, she was sitting at a table at the far end of the darkened room. Pete walks in and thanks her for seeing him, and he approaches the table with the items for her to inspect. Behind the woman, incense were burning, and Pete said that he saw a human figure form in the smoke and became a solid entity, standing behind the woman's chair. Again, though, we grew up watching James Randi. Pete was prepared for her tricks. She doesn't acknowledge the being behind her, and Pete ignores it as well, doing his best not to look intimidated or even entertained by something he thought debunkable. My sad cold case story is retold. As she pushes some of the items around on the table in front of her, her hand freezes over an old book. She looks up from the table. She stares deep into my brother's eyes. She says, "Your sister is not missing, but someone else is trying to talk to you." Pete sticks to his story, but is willing to see what she means by someone else. He asks, "Who?" And she asks, "Do you have an uncle, Norman?" He says, "Yes," because we really did have an Uncle Norman. She asked if he died. Pete says yes, because Norm had died in an accident a few years earlier. Norm was like Pete's idol or hero. When she mentioned his name, his skepticism began to melt, and he couldn't hide his genuine emotional response when she started talking about him. We hadn't role-played a situation like this. Pete didn't know how to respond, getting called out directly, still staring right at him. She tells him that she knew he was there under false pretenses. He gave up the goods and admitted to the hit piece he was trying to write for class. How do you stay in business if you don't take clients? Who are you ripping off to pay for all of this expensive stuff? With no other options, he let his questions fly. She told him she doesn't take monetary payments for her services. She knows who really needs her and who doesn't. The decorations in her home, and even the home itself, were gifts for her, ones that had been given by grateful clients. Then she says, "Norm is here though, and he wants to tell you that he's burning in hell for eternity." She laughs and tells Pete that his soul was weak and that she'll make sure demons devour it to recoup Pete's disrespect. He stood up from the table, started to gather the things that he brought. The woman left him with one last warning before Pete could run out. She addressed him by his real name, saying, "Pete, heed this warning, or you too will join your pathetic Uncle Norm in hell. Never return to this property. If you're walking down the sidewalk, cross the street before you reach my house, or your last name will be a synonym for cursed misfortune." He says he didn't even try to remember that, but he can't forget it. The cloud figure standing behind her then moved like it was coming towards Pete, and that's when he almost fell trying to get out of there. And that was the end of it. I think he changed the topic of his investigative piece on some protests happening at his campus. It was the last time my brother ever attempted that hard-hitting nose-to-the-ground journalism. He traded it for a more political field and never looked back. That psychic's house is still there to this day, and to this day, I don't really have any reason to be walking on that sidewalk, entering town, but if I ever do find myself moseying up that way, I make sure to cross the street before passing the house. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night, and keep those eyes open for those deep sleep videos. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Special thanks to the Darkest Hour channel members: Lori TESDAHL, Sarah Marie, Robert Bailey, COLTDADDY Eagle, Mallory Dominguez, KARI WATKINS, PILAR TREDEN WIXSON, Larry Hill, Ripley, JOJO STARCHER, Mary Patrick, Debbie LAFRENIERE, Julie Bourdelais, Jennifer BECK, MARINA LACHNER, Make Hamilton Home, Evan Pratt, Mary Hineline, Katharine Yes.ImtherealKatie Isabelle, Land Shark, Danielle Hecht, Veronica Mckiernan, Keziah Pietersen, and Amber Baker. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of our patrons: Tracy S., Mary H., Tanya F., Tamra K., Monica L., Zoe Watt, Shelley B., Donald C., Marion T., Rat Girl, Alicia S., Aaron G., Nikki H., Mr. Revenant, Naz K., Brendan G., Paul T., Nicholas C., Tony P., Lizanne, Arlene F., Adrian, T.F. Parham, Jason G., Lori T., and Bobo Jenkins. If you want to support the Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, Amanda, darkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.